Well, I'm here with Khara, who is going to tell us about her classes at the Photoshop Virtual Summit 4. Welcome, Khara.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dave.
My pleasure. So, first of all, I got to say, and you've done a number of these summits with us, and you always win the award for the most interesting class titles. Other people just say things like, the magic of selections, but yours is like,
Mm.
texture tell all and things like that. So,
Yeah, I'm
I
big on
have
alliteration.
I have to ask you, what is cooking in the Photoshop kitchen?
Ooh, yes, very good. Well, because I've been really into building collages lately, and just kind of funky, a little bit surreal, but definitely funky collages. And people have been asking about them, and so I thought it would be fun to kind of make a class on that. But to really understand what goes into it, you really have to think like a cook or like a chef. And I think so much of what people learn when they're new to Photoshop is really recipes, right? People learn like how to create this effect, follow these recipes.
Right.
And that's great. It's a super great way to learn. But then there comes a point where you're like, okay, but now I just want to make my own thing. And that's a lot like cooking. Um, and I think I'm better at Photoshop than I am cooking for sure. But so I thought, let's talk about a Photoshop kitchen, and we're going to talk about how to cook in Photoshop, and what the main ingredients would be. And it turns out that I think one of the most important ingredients is experimentation, and not being able or not being afraid
Right.
to make a mess and break some eggs. And I mean, when I do cook, I am very messy, and I try to clean as I go. That's what my grandmother taught me. But I still just like make a big mess. Like, I don't know how people cook and don't get things on the floor. I get things on the floor, so I have to like wash the floor when I'm done. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of take that approach to Photoshop.
Hmm.
And so that's how I came up with the Photoshop kitchen. And we're
I love
gonna
that. I love that idea because for years I know I've said to people that I recall the very first really interesting Photoshop book I ever got way back when was like the Photoshop Wow book. And it was like
mm,
these by Jack Davis. And it was like these really cool, if you follow these steps, you will get this end result. But the
mm-hmm.
problem was that all I was doing was following those steps, which meant I was just getting really good at following instructions. I didn't really understand why I was painting with black or white on the mask. So then, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
I started to go, okay, well, what happens if and I'd go a little bit off the beaten track and kind of go, oh, that's why he's saying, fill with black. So I think that's a great idea to um, give people that. It's almost like permission to experiment, isn't it? You're saying it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. What's the worst thing can happen is you'll have to start over again.
Right. And I think there's a lot of value too in showing the process of not just the Photoshop steps, but the whole, like, how do you even get an idea for a composite or a collage that's going to work?
Hmm.
And so I really tried to explain like my process of how I go about gathering source files, and really trying to show that it is a process. And although I could recreate the image for people in like 5 minutes if I really had to, once I know what I'm doing and how I want it, of course, that's very easy. But the process itself is really, you can't fast forward it. You
Hmm.
have to experiment and try things, and a lot of things are not going to work. And you just kind of have to know that's part of the process and keep going.
Right.
And I don't know that people always talk about it. And especially
Mhm.
when you're new, it's really easy to feel like you see an instructor just like whip up something brilliant. um, you know, cook it up real quick. It's like a TV show. Everything's perfect. So I was trying to kind of make it a little more real, and show how it actually comes together.
Right. And I think one of the things I really think is an important part of the summit as a whole is the length of the classes. Like we're not doing 10-minute tutorials where you have to kind of have that pre-baked, step because you just don't have time to show everything. So by making the classes 45 minutes ish, then it means you have the luxury, I guess, of saying this is the thought process behind it, and then here's why. And even I know I've had classes in the summit before. I went down a path and kind of went, nope, that's not going to work. But rather than cutting it out, I was like, well, that's the reality of what I was doing, was trying something to see what would happen. And then I thought, don't really like that, so let's backtrack and start again.
I think
but that's still a valuable lesson.
Exactly. Watching people back up and undo and throw things out is crucial, because otherwise I think it's too easy when you're new, especially, to just get psyched out and be like, I'm never gonna make things that come together like this.
Yep.
But they don't just come together. It's quite a process.
Sure.
For sure.
That sounds really cool. And I know for VIP members, you've put together a pretty nice collection of what would you call them? Some elements they can play with?
Yeah, so I put together, I keeping with the kitchen cooking theme, I called it a ready-made meal kit. And it contains 50, I think at least 50, maybe more, but at least 50 different abstract objects and just kind of things that you can put together in interesting ways and create something. So yeah, because I just want people to really jump in and not worry so much about the hurdles of making the perfect selection or, any of that kind of stuff, and really just start playing with composition. And so making this meal kit, everything's already been selected and the background's already been removed, and people can just start playing and experimenting with color and shape and all of that. And yeah, it's super fun. I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Now, your other session is all about the wonderful world of textures, something that's near and dear to my heart, because I love taking photos of my own of textures that I see everywhere, and then B, finding ways to incorporate them into a photo. So give us a bit of an idea of what this class is all about.
Yeah, so essentially that. And we do some texture, adding things like roughing up some text and adding a giant crack. That was actually a picture of the crack, like in my driveway or on the sidewalk somewhere. I went out with my son doing some work and taking pictures. And I thought, how can we incorporate this? So playing with stuff like that. And also incorporating the textures into, portraits and more kind of composite work. So some clever ways of how you can utilize texture more than just like, it can be as simple as just dropping in an image, a texture overlay, changing the blend mode, adjusting the opacity, and like that could be it. That's like one level, and that can be fantastic. But we also go into how you can like apply texture to different parts of a scene or an image, and how you can make your own textures. So last summer, I think I made this treasure hunt thing for my son and the neighbor, and I actually aged paper, and it was this whole big thing, but it was super fun. And I had a lot of fun aging the paper. And so there's a small little section about how that works, and how people might do that at home and create their own textures. And if you're not into creating your own, we also talk about how you can find existing textures and make use of them too.
Awesome. Well, that sounds awesome. And I remember on Instagram following along as you were preparing that treasure hunt, thought it was just the coolest idea and the fact that combining, I've always thought it was interesting when we have this amazing tool, digital tool of Photoshop, but to incorporate actual physical something, like taking a paintbrush and painting on a piece of paper and using that as a texture or an overlay or whatever. I think that's an interesting way to combine the best of both worlds, I guess you'd say.
Exactly. So I don't know if you have a favorite texture that you go to? Like, even if it's not the same photo, do you have a favorite? Like, you're like, I love concrete or tree bark, or I don't know. Do you have like a favorite
I'd say
genre?
anything that's like cracked or weathered. So whether it's weathered paint or cracks in sidewalks, things like that. I remember going on a photo walk once. I was actually leading this photo walk, and all the other people were looking. I could see they were composing shots with the building, and I was like looking down at the pavement, going, "Ooh, another crack!" And they were just like,
Ooh.
"Okay, good for you." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. I've got this whole folder full of crack textures." I have to be careful how I worded it. So
Yeah. Careful. You love crack, but you got to
yes,
specify.
exactly.
Yep.
Cracked textures.
Exactly.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing both your classes. I'm sure other people are. Now, I've already mentioned that you get the award for the best class names, but clearly people watching, I'm sure, will agree you also get a bonus award for the best earrings, because
Oh,
come on.
yes. Thank you. Aren't those fun? I thought they'd be appropriate for
They are
for
very
it today,
appropriate.
and
It's awesome.
yeah, they're
Well,
super
thanks for
fun.
taking the time to chat about your classes, and I'll
Yeah.
see you at the summit.
See you there.